Mais de 1.200 anos antes de Cristo, duas grandes civilizações dominavam o Oriente Médio: o Império Egípcio e, ao norte, o Império Hitita. Durante gerações, esses poderosos reinos disputaram o controle de uma estreita faixa de terra ligando Ásia, Europa e África. Situada na atual Síria, essa passagem, conhecida na época como Amuro, era o segredo do poder no Oriente Médio. Mas em 1288 a.C., a tensão chegou a ponto de ebulição. Foi o momento decisivo do reinado de Ramsés o Grande e transformou o jovem faraó em uma lenda viva. O conflito sangrento aconteceu em Kadesh, uma luta épica decidida por habilidade, velocidade, artimanhas e sorte, na qual até os governantes se viram na linha de fogo.
Empires of Egypt and of Hatti were clashing for the reasons that empires always clash: power. The city of Kadesh, situated at the eastern end of the Eleuthерus Valley, was the gateway to northern Syria. Control of Syria, its natural resources and trade routes equated to control of the ancient world.
Long ago, the Egyptians had conquered Kadesh and Amurru, a state next to it, and Seti I had a war with the Hittites first, that was Ramesses' father, and he actually got Kadesh and Amurru, but then he came to an agreement with the Hittite king saying, okay, we better make peace because it's making wars expensive. Now his young son Ramesses II was very ambitious and obviously did not hold with this solution.
If the Egyptians wish to break out into central Syria, then they have to have control of Kadesh. If the Hittites want to prevent the Egyptians from doing this, they have to have Kadesh.
A estrada para Kadesh foi feita em uma época de relativa paz entre egípcios, hititas e o povo Mitanni, que vivia onde hoje fica a Turquia e o Iraque. Um tratado entre o Egito e o povo Mitanni dividiu a região de Amuro de acordo com os interesses comerciais de cada império. Após a divisão, os interesses egípcios abrangiam até a colônia costeira no norte, em Ugarit. No entanto, ações políticas em Amuro começaram a ameaçar o frágil equilíbrio de poder. Um movimento de independência fez com que o povo Mitanni interviesse e ocupasse a cidade de Kadesh. Não seria a última vez que a cidade mudaria de mãos.
The Egyptians and the Hittites were the two superpowers of their day. Egypt controlled most of the southern part of the area we call Syria and Palestine. The Hittites wanted the northern part. And there had been a long seesawing conflict between them over the last 3 or 4 generations.
The city of Kadesh sits in a strategically vital location at the eastern end of the Eleuthерus Valley. Possession of the Eleuthерus Valley equated to easy access to northern Syria. Northern Syria, with its vast natural wealth and trade routes, equated to power, control of the ancient world.
Strategic importance is impossible to overrate. And indeed, if you look at the history of the Crusades, for example, or the activities of the British General Allenby during the First World War, you'll find that the same strategic imperatives operate at those periods also.
Um jogo tático estava se desenrolando em Amuro e os hititas estavam prestes a controlar a região. Por volta de 1380 a.C., Kadesh estava sob domínio hitita.
The Hittites are really rather a fascinating people. The heartland of the Hittite Empire lay in what we now call Turkey, specifically in Anatolia, and the Hittites as such appear in that area very roughly about 2000 BC.
They moved into Syria, they demolished one of the kingdoms which was allied to Egypt, Mitanni, and they came right up to Kadesh and they took it at the time of Akhenaten, the famous Sun King, who wasn't interested in war. So Egypt lost it 70 years before Ramesses.
And at the time that the conflict took place between Ramses II and the Hittites, we're very much at the high summer of the development of the Hittite Empire.
Com o passar dos anos, o poder hitita oscilou, com o exército do Império sofrendo muito nas mãos dos egípcios e do povo Mitanni. Por fim, em 1380 a.C., os hititas conseguiram derrotar os Mitanni, aumentando sua rivalidade com os egípcios e estendendo seus domínios ao Egeu, à Armênia e à Mesopotâmia superior. Foi essa expansão que colocou os hititas, governados pelo rei Muatales, em conflito com os egípcios, que chegaria a um clímax sangrento em Kadesh.
Kadesh was the natural crossroads of this conflict. It lay across the east-west passage that gets you from the coast of the Mediterranean into the Syrian desert, and it also lay on the river Orontes, which goes north-south and is the basic waterfare of that part of the world. Kadesh, therefore, was the point where armies tended to meet.
Os hititas estavam de olho em Kadesh há algum tempo. Sob os faraós expansionistas Sete I e Ramsés II, os egípcios queriam expandir seu império até Amuro e além. Sete I obteve alguns sucessos e Ramsés decidiu reacender o conflito, levando seu exército para o norte, via Gaza, passando por Damasco, na direção de Kadesh. O objetivo de Ramsés era simples: derrotar as forças hititas e acabar com sua influência na Síria.
He was completely confident about everything he was doing. Nothing had gone wrong in 5 years as a young pharaoh, the age of 25 to 30. When you're young, you're ambitious, nothing can go wrong.
Ramses is described on his own tomb as a youthful lord, a hero without peer. He came to the throne at the age probably of 25, certainly not much later than 30, and he came to the throne full of the vigour of youth, intent on regaining Egypt's lost possessions in northern Syria.
He was completely ebullient and ambustious. He compared with Muhammad Ali in his early days, the famous boxer. If there's something he's interested in, he will go for it. He had immense ambition. He and his father and his dynasty had to follow the magnificent 18th dynasty and had just built all the biggest temples there were in Egypt, and they had to follow that.
Before he came to the throne, he was very active in his father's reign. In the first couple of years of the reign of Seti I, he was active in Libya and also in Seti's campaign against Amuru and against Kadesh, where both Amuru and Kadesh were actually taken by Seti I. And Seti had to give it up, but nevertheless he had first-hand experience of campaigning in that area. And then later, but still in the reign of Seti I, we find Ramses II campaigning on his own in a small military operation in Nubia, which was successful. And then, of course, before the campaign of Regnum V in his own reign, he had been operating in Amuru, so he'd been able to consolidate his knowledge of the area and build up his experience of the area. So we're not dealing with a tyro. This man knew about war, and he knew about the theatre of operations.
O exército hitita era muito mais heterogêneo que o egípcio. O exército que enfrentou os egípcios em Kadesh contava com hititas de todos os cantos do império. Ele era formado por 18 povos aliados e vassalos dos hititas, o que dificultava muito o comando e o controle.
The Hittites had to communicate in various levels, using various languages and using various interpreters. That made their movements much more complicated than the Egyptians.
The Hittite army was very much the cream of the cream. It was very well trained. Its chariot force was extremely efficient. Its military equipment was extremely good. Their tactical expertise was very great. They were experts at siege warfare.
The Hittites were the great metal workers of their day. They had access in Turkey, Anatolia, to sources of metal which the Egyptians simply did not have. The Egyptians had to import metal and import technology to go along with it. The Hittites were therefore at an advantage in a straight fight. What they lacked was maneuverability. They tended to work in a sledgehammer scheme, coming down and using force in order to assert their will over the battlefield. The Egyptians, on the other hand, were more lightweight but much more maneuverable. They could move quickly, take advantage of surprise, and could communicate from one part of their army much more easily than the Hittites could.
A maioria dos soldados hititas não era paga por seus serviços e lutava para cumprir obrigações feudais. Mas para muitos deles, o fascínio do exército era a possibilidade de grandes saques na batalha.
They were not paid salaries, they were not paid regular maintenance, but they were expected on the battlefield to get prizes, booty and loot.
Mas o amor pelos espólios da guerra também era o tendão de Aquiles dos hititas, e mais tarde seria sua ruína. Além disso, os hititas dependiam muito de tropas mercenárias para aumentar seu número. No entanto, o rei Muatales havia realizado várias campanhas de sucesso antes de Kadesh, e os veteranos formavam o núcleo de seus exércitos, oferecendo valiosa experiência e liderança. A organização dos egípcios, adversários dos hititas, era muito diferente. O exército egípcio era de elite, separada da maior parte da população egípcia. Uma ideia de superioridade era cultivada dentro do exército e seus membros se consideravam uma elite exclusiva, distinta e superior às pessoas comuns.
In Egypt, the Ramesside family itself, Ramesses was of a military family, and generals and military were therefore an important element in the Egyptian government and court makeup. There are plenty of civilian administrators, but the army was very important. Below the official level of generals and so on, you got the well-educated level for the administration, scribal training and so on. The ordinary Egyptian peasantry could be conscripted for when they were needed, trained in infantry, but chariotry was an elite corps.
The Egyptian army was largely composed of Egyptians, although there were some mercenaries from Nubia and from Libya as well, but it was a much more coherent army than the Hittite one.
They had large infantry divisions and then chariot corps alongside them. An Egyptian infantry division might be 4,000 or 5,000 men, the chariots 500 chariots. So Ramesses could have taken 20,000 people to Kadesh or 14,000 people to Kadesh. Muatales is certainly supposed to have taken 36,000 according to the figures that Ramesses gives, so 17,000 and 18,000 people, something like that is quoted. We can't prove the figures, but they could raise quite big armies in those days.
Muita ênfase era dada ao tempo de serviço e um núcleo de profissionais experientes era vital para a sua eficiência. O exército egípcio era separado em 4 unidades: Amon, Ra, Ta e Sutek, que receberam nomes de deuses egípcios. As unidades que atuaram em Kadesh foram recrutadas de diferentes regiões do Império Egípcio. Ramsés comandava a unidade Amon, que tinha o nome do deus de Tebas. Ra era o nome do deus Sol de Heliópolis. Sutek, o nome do deus da tempestade, adorado pela família de Ramsés, e Ta era o deus de Mênfis. Essas unidades eram compostas por bigas e infantaria, com um contingente de arqueiros, totalizando cerca de 5.000 homens. 4.000 eram da infantaria e os demais conduziam as 500 bigas. O poema épico que narra a batalha alega que Ramsés tinha 2.000 bigas e 16.000 soldados, muito menos que os hititas. No entanto, como foi Ramsés quem encomendou o poema, essa vantagem dos hititas sobre seu exército pode ser um exagero. As armas usadas pelas infantarias egípcias e hititas também eram muito diferentes. Os hititas geralmente empunhavam uma espada de bronze na forma de foice e usavam capacetes de bronze e armadura. Alguns também carregavam longas lanças para enfrentar cavaleiros ou bigas. A infantaria egípcia empunhava uma versão da espada foice chamada kopesh, além de um machado de bronze e uma adaga. Eles também utilizavam um arco composto, que os homens das bigas também usavam, muito eficiente a pouca distância. Nas mãos de um arqueiro habilidoso, ele também poderia matar a longas distâncias. A Batalha de Kadesh foi travada no 9º dia do 3º mês do 5º ano do reinado de Ramsés II, ou seja, no fim de maio de 1288 a.C. Ramsés, liderando a unidade Amon, havia levado 1 mês para ir do Egito até os arredores de Kadesh. Ele viajou por Canaã e pelo chamado Vale das Coníferas, o atual Vale Bica, antes de parar em uma cidade com seu nome, Ramsés. Seguindo para o norte, Ramsés acampou na Cordilheira de Kadesh, 24 quilômetros ao sul da cidade. Na manhã seguinte, o faraó foi para o norte, atravessar o rio Arontes, conhecido hoje como Nar El-Assi, e seguiu para Kadesh. Então, o faraó encontrou 2 agentes hititas, alegando serem desertores. Eles o convenceram de que a maior parte do exército hitita estava a 160 quilômetros dali, em Alepo. Como a maioria dos artifícios bem-sucedidos, a informação não tentou convencer os egípcios de algo diferente do que eles já acreditavam, e Ramsés se convenceu.
He was far too complacent. He thought he knew best. He was young, brash, a little naive, and ambitious. He just plunged ahead. He wasn't as cautious. He wasn't seasoned like Muwatlits, who've been in this job 20 or 30 years.
Almost certainly, Ramses concluded that he had gained the initiative in the battle, and almost certainly his guard was relaxed.
But of course, the real issue here is what had happened to Ramses II's own intelligence-gathering operation. He was very much in bandit country, and this is enemy territory, and there should have been a screen of scouts out in front of the army looking for the Hittites. Nothing like that was clearly taking place. And one can only, I think, come to the view that the actions of Ramses II and his commanders at this point were reckless.
Em resposta a essa informação, Ramsés tomou a iniciativa atacando Kadesh. Acreditando que a maior parte do exército hitita não estava na cidade, a unidade Amon de Ramsés atravessou o rio Arontes e chegou a Kadesh bem ordenada, montando uma posição fortificada no noroeste da cidade. Essa posição controlava a estrada que seguia para o norte. Os 2 espiões hititas, após terem sido liberados por Ramsés, voltaram ao acampamento hitita e informaram as ações dele. Ramsés pensava estar montando uma armadilha egípcia.
This was what Ramesses wanted to believe. He thought that he'd move quicker and much more intelligently than the Hittites. He was about to have a rude shock.
Soldados egípcios, em explorações de rotina, capturaram 2 soldados hititas que tinham uma outra versão da história. Após um longo interrogatório, eles disseram ao faraó que o principal exército hitita não estava a quilômetros de distância, mas sim ao nordeste de Kadesh, a cerca de 4 quilômetros dali, e que era mais numeroso que a areia da margem do rio. As implicações dessa nova notícia foram péssimas para o faraó e seus exércitos.
Muwatallish, I think, played his cards very well. We have to take the view that he and his high command had achieved a brilliant tactical success in getting their forces to within easy striking distance of the Egyptians and masking their position behind the city of Kadesh. This is the kind of tactical brilliance one would expect of the Hittites.
Ramsés agora estava em grandes apuros. Apenas sua unidade Amon havia chegado a Kadesh. Com seu exército dividido, a vantagem era dos hititas, caso quisessem se aproveitar da posição. Mas acontecimentos no dia seguinte sugerem que o rei Muwatallis não conhecia a força de sua própria posição. Ramsés agiu rápido e planejou mandar seu ministro-chefe apressar o restante do exército egípcio. Àquela altura, as outras unidades do exército de Ramsés estavam espalhadas ao sul. A unidade Ra estava atravessando o rio Arontes, 10 quilômetros ao sul da posição do faraó. As outras duas unidades estavam ainda mais ao sul, com Ta ainda saindo das florestas em Laboe. A unidade Ra atravessou o rio às 2:30 da tarde e às 3 estava na planície de Kadesh com a cidade visível à distância. Enquanto a unidade seguia para seu destino, de repente ela foi atacada por inúmeras bigas hititas. O ministro-chefe do faraó, após testemunhar o ataque a Ra, correu para alcançar a unidade Ta, deixando o acampamento às 3:30 da tarde.
Here we have a superb example of the tactical expertise of the Hittites. They've achieved total tactical surprise, and the effect would have been mind-numbing.
Hittite chariots exploded forth from a screen of vegetation along the Al-Makadiah River, a tributary of the Orontes. The Egyptian corps of prey, moving steadily north, had little or no warning of the impending attack. And indeed the screening force of Egyptian chariots was overwhelmed almost instantaneously by the ferocity and speed of the Hittite advance.
As bigas hititas, muito mais pesadas, esmagaram as egípcias e suas tripulações. Sem perder o ritmo, as bigas hititas atacaram a infantaria egípcia, indo de encontro às suas formações. O ataque foi tão feroz que as forças hititas atravessaram as colunas egípcias e saíram do lado oeste. Mas suas bigas eram tão pesadas que não podiam virar rápido e tiveram que continuar a oeste para poderem virar. Fazendo isso, elas ficaram paralelas ao exército egípcio, permitindo que eles corressem para o acampamento de Ramsés.
The Hittites had heavy-grade weaponry. Heavy-grade swords, heavy-grade bows, and above all, great chariots that could smash their way through a battle line. In a direct struggle of power against power, the Hittites would probably win. But the Egyptians, with their maneuverability and their flexibility, could put up a pretty good fight as well.
The Hittites favoured a far larger 3-man chariot with a driver, a shield bearer, and an armoured spear carrier. The Egyptians, by contrast, favoured a 2-man chariot, driver and a spear carrier, also equipped with a bow. The Egyptian chariots were far lighter and by modern standards looked comparatively fragile. However, their lightweight design was very robust and extremely maneuverable.
As duas tropas adversárias chegaram quase simultaneamente, com os sobreviventes da unidade Ra à frente. Observando do acampamento do faraó, a unidade Amon começou a entender a confusa batalha à sua frente e se preparou para enfrentar as forças hititas que queriam atacar o acampamento pelo lado oeste. Com os soldados da unidade Amon preparados para a ação, as bigas hititas atacaram o acampamento com grande velocidade, matando muitos egípcios. Mas o ritmo das bigas hititas foi desacelerado pelas bagagens no acampamento, permitindo que os egípcios as atacassem. As pilhas de homens e cavalos mortos retardaram ainda mais os hititas, e os egípcios viram que agora estavam em vantagem.
Survivors of the prey division and their Hittite pursuers reached Pharaoh's camp almost simultaneously. It took a while for the men of Ammon, the division at the encampment, to realize what had happened and for a defense to be mustered. Members of Pharaoh's family were moved to the eastern end of the camp, away from the main danger, and Pharaoh's bodyguards and other infantry began repelling the Hittite chariots.
Mais problemas aguardavam pelos hititas. Surpresos com a imensa riqueza dentro do acampamento do faraó, os soldados hititas esqueceram sua tarefa e passaram a saquear e roubar.
The Hittites got into the Egyptian camp, broke in, and realized, of course, that there was the booty of the richest superpower on earth, gold in profusion was something that Pharaoh had, and the people of the Near East knew this. The temptation to plunder the camp was irresistible. That gave the Egyptians a great advantage. The column of tar was fresh. It could concentrate on the situation without being distracted. It was able to keep up firepower on the Hittites.
They are trapped inside the camp, and the Egyptians set about systematically butchering them. There are scenes, in fact, surviving of the Egyptian troops putting all these to the sword, and the text says that not one of them escaped. Now, Egyptian texts are not renowned for their modesty, but I find it entirely plausible that any Hittite who got inside this square enclosure didn't get out alive.
A batalha estava relativamente equilibrada e, avistando uma oportunidade vital, Ramsés a aproveitou.
Even at this stage, despite the fact that the momentum of the Hittite attack had been impeded, the outlook for the corps of Ammon did not look particularly good. A dramatic change in the course of events was required.
When you found the enemy pouring into your camp, mayhem everywhere, and they were going for you, he had one choice. You had to fight or die on the spot. He called his equerries, he called his immediate people around and said, look, grab your weapons, we're going. It was do or die, and Ramesses chose to do, whether he died or not.
Apesar do choque do ataque hitita e do caos da batalha, a liderança do faraó foi digna de um rei, e assim surgiu a lenda que dura até hoje.
The problem about what Ramesses does is that we've only got his account, and you're dealing with one of the big egos. According to Ramesses' account, he realizes that things are desperate. There are no reinforcements. He's on his own with his trusty chariot and charioteer. He sends up a prayer to the Egyptian god of war, turns around and single-handed scatters the Hittite army from the field. The reality is likely to have been a bit different.
Ramses II was not on his own. That is absolutely inconceivable. And from time to time, the text does admit that he did get assistance. I think what we have is an extremely brave man in a situation which he probably saw as being almost impossible. And you have something which John Keegan has described as flight to the front. You simply rush at the enemy, there's nothing else to do, and you keep rushing at the enemy in the hope that this will have a positive effect.
He had brute courage. I think we have to grant him that. He thought, right, if I'm going to die, at least I'm going to die as Pharaoh of Egypt should die, but I'm going to try and break out. This is an act of desperation.
And I think he almost certainly played an important role in arresting the momentum of the attacking force.
A bordo de sua biga, Ramsés deu uma ordem ao condutor, Mena, e levou todas as bigas egípcias para fora do acampamento pelo lado leste. Eles deram a volta no acampamento pelo noroeste e montaram a formação de ataque.
With modern battles, you've got modern communications, but they're not infallible. In the ancient world, you're relying on signals sent through the dust of battle. You're relying on conflicting reports coming in. You're trying to make very quick decisions based on confusing evidence. If the Hittite king had acted swiftly, he could actually have penned the Egyptians into their camp and finished them off. But he didn't, and bit by bit, the Egyptians were able to turn the entire battle round. The Hittites came within a whisker of a complete victory, and they lost it, probably through confused intelligence.
At this point, the battle really hung in the balance. The initial Hittite attack had been broken, but had not been defeated. Neither, however, were the Egyptians making much headway. It needed a dramatic turn of events to influence the outcome of the battle, and it is this that Ramses provided, firstly through inspirational leadership, and secondly through rounding up and taking what men he could to effect a dramatic counterattack on the Hittites and to destroy conclusively their ambitions of an overwhelming tactical success.
De repente, os sitiados viraram sitiadores. E apesar do perigo que os egípcios representavam, os hititas não conseguiam repelir Ramsés e seus homens. Os hititas estavam concentrados em lutar no acampamento, enfrentando soldados e arqueiros, cujo fogo rápido e preciso agora estava dizimando os hititas.
Ramses and a small contingent of the army put in a series of attacks on the Hittites, and that has the effect not of breaking them, but of slowing them down.
Com os hititas paralisados, as bigas egípcias puderam manobrar e se posicionar. Ramsés enviou suas bigas na direção da unidade hitita que lutava com a infantaria egípcia. Os arqueiros do faraó começaram a atirar no inimigo, e os hititas começaram a recuar desordenadamente, perseguidos por Ramsés à frente do exército egípcio.
Ramesses was able to hold his troops together by an example of bravery. That alone wouldn't have made much difference. But the psychological factor and the arrival of the extra divisions of the Egyptian army was what made the day and was what turned it into an Egyptian victory rather than a complete rout.
Do ponto de vista do rei Muatalis, o tempo estava se esgotando. Seria necessária uma ação decisiva para evitar a total aniquilação do exército hitita.
The Hittite king is faced with several options. One is simply to get out. The other is to get out in such a way that it gives the impression that you're still the victor. And in the ancient Orient that counts.
Restavam poucos homens para executar qualquer plano para resgatar seu exército. A única força disponível era a comitiva do próprio rei, de oficiais de alta patente e nobres.
When he saw trouble, he had to take a decision. Wait and see what happens or try and correct it. Psammetichus obviously tried to correct it. He sent the chariots across, the second force. In charge of that force were many of his close people, including a brother, the highest in the hierarchy, the military hierarchy, because when they all got driven back into the river and dragged out the other side, dead and alive, the Egyptians gave a list of the names of some of these noble people, and included the king's brother, one of his brothers. So it was a complete cut-off of a great many of the Hittite military hierarchy. That was a bigger disaster than what Ramesses suffered. He lost some people, but mainly ordinary charioteers. He didn't lose his chief of staff.
Movidos pela lealdade a Muatalis, a unidade despreparada atravessou o Arontes para ir ao acampamento do faraó e tentar atraí-lo, afastando-os das bigas hititas que fugiam. O plano parecia simples, mas havia mais problemas à espera dos hititas. Quando a unidade da nobreza hitita apareceu no acampamento, ela foi recebida por reforços egípcios que chegaram inesperadamente do norte. Era a unidade Nearim, que havia se separado do exército principal, mas que voltara em um momento oportuno.
I think there's enough in the relevant textual material to indicate that Ramses had sent this force to Amuru with the intention that it would come down the Eleutheros River Valley to attack Kadesh from the west. And that, I think, is tactically good, and it's strategically good. This means that pressure would be exerted on the city of Kadesh from the west or northwest and also from the south. But their appearance, exactly when they were needed on the field of battle, I'm certain was an amazing piece of good fortune.
If the Hittite king moved perhaps an hour earlier, that would have made all the difference. But the arrival of the noblemen of the Hittites corresponded with the arrival of the 4th division of the Egyptian army coming from the rear. That was simply too much for them to cope with. The extra chariots in the camp, under the pressure of the 4th division, simply added to the chaos and the inability of the Hittites to extricate themselves from what was rapidly becoming a mess.
These were troops who had not been engaged. Their morale had not been shaken by contact with the Hittite forces. And they were able to start, I think, with easy pickings. They were able to catch forces of the Hittites in the camp with their guard down. And I think they were critically important, therefore, in arresting the progress of the attacking Hittite chariotry. It was their arrival in the end that saved Ramses Bacon, I think.
As Bigas Nearim lançaram inúmeras saraivadas de flechas contra os hititas, que acabaram dando meia volta para fugir pelo rio Arontes. Mas quando fizeram isso, se depararam com a unidade de Ramsés que voltava do sul. Os infelizes hititas ficaram presos entre dois exércitos do faraó.
The Hittites realize that they've been caught from both sides, with the 4th detachment in their rear and the reinforcements coming from the other side of the battlefield. They start to retreat, and they start to retreat, which turns into a flight straight into the river Orontes.
Em sua fuga desesperada, muitos morreram afogados no rio, entre eles importantes membros da sociedade e do governo hitita que fizeram muita falta depois da guerra.
There they are, cascading into the river, bit by bit, trying to get over. And there's a wonderful scene of the brother of the king of the Hittites being hauled out of the river and held upside down to get the water out of his insides that he's swallowed during the flight.
Mesmo depois de tanto tempo, ainda não se sabe bem o que houve após a batalha. Relatos da época dizem que a luta continuou até o dia seguinte. No entanto, existe polêmica sobre quem lutava com quem. Alguns historiadores interpretaram os detalhes da matança após a batalha como egípcio matando egípcio em vez de matar hitita. Supõe-se que Ramsés passou o dia seguinte executando desertores das unidades Amon e Ra, que quebraram seu voto de lealdade ao faraó.
In general, the Egyptians were not the most vicious people of the ancient world. Atrocities are very rarely recorded in Egyptian sources. It's possible in the heat of the battle that Ramesses did execute some prisoners and some survivors. That happens in many battles, in many civilizations. But on the whole, it's not characteristic either of Ramesses or of the Egyptian army.
The suggestion has been put up that Ramesses executed his own troops afterwards. There's not one scrap of evidence for this. It's a classical concept from Greco-Roman times that's got nothing to do with Egypt. There's no evidence at all for that. It's based on a misinterpretation of the Egyptian text. He gave them a thoroughgoing telling off. There must have been red scarlet with the telling off they were given, but that was as far as it went. I suspect when they got home, heads rolled in terms of demotions in the intelligence department. The less intelligent officers went, I suspect. Some of the people were promoted. But of course, they're discreet about that sort of thing.
Embora Ramsés tenha obtido uma vitória impressionante em Kadesh, seu exército foi tão massacrado que ele teve que rever suas ambições para a região. Depois de Kadesh, Ramsés não tinha homens e materiais suficientes para invadir o norte da Síria, mesmo com a chegada tardia das unidades Ta e Sutek. A cidade de Kadesh continuava nas mãos dos hititas e Ramsés não podia fazer nada. Os egípcios podem ter vencido a batalha, mas os hititas ainda controlavam a guerra. Para os egípcios, o objetivo da guerra e da campanha foi recuperar a cidade de Kadesh e destruir as posições hititas na Síria. Nenhum dos dois foi alcançado.
The immediate aftermath of the battle is that the Egyptians are holding the field and the Hittites are retreating, but retreating with honor.
Nobody gained. The immediate aftermath otherwise was a complete stalemate on the ground, and the Hittites may have lost out another way. Ramesses didn't win Kadesh. He won a victory on the day personally, but he didn't get Kadesh. He never occupied that city.
In terms of an assessment of who won the Battle of Kadesh, one would almost certainly say that the tactical victor is Ramses. However, in terms of realizing his wider strategic ambitions, even after success on the field of Kadesh, Ramses is no closer to satisfying those goals.
On the second day, the Egyptians try to budge the Hittite force, and they don't succeed in this. And the Hittite king, Muwatallish, offers terms to the Egyptians. And one of the things I rather like about the Hittites is their realism. Clearly, from their point of view, they had won a great strategic victory. And by strategic, I mean that they have prevented Ramses II from achieving his aims.
They then start to ask themselves, what happens next? They could go on doing this indefinitely, wearing out their resources, having one Kadesh after another, claiming victory on one side and then next year a victory for the other side. But a more intelligent solution is to look at what both the superpowers want out of the diplomatic scene and try and come to some form of lasting arrangement. And the interesting thing is that that's what they do. They go for the diplomatic solution rather than the military stalemate.
16 anos após a Batalha de Kadesh, tratado de paz entre egípcios e hititas foi assinado.
The Egyptians and the Hittites start to think about the situation. And bit by bit, they draw up the first surviving treaty that we have in any detail from the ancient world. They sit down, they start to say, this is what the two sides need out of the political situation. They start to negotiate an extradition clause between the two great powers that are dividing up the Near East. They negotiate treaties of alliance and defense. And most interesting of all, they negotiate an economic clause. If either empire falls into economic difficulties, the other side is going to send food aid to it to bail it out.
O tratado reconhecia os limites de influência entre os egípcios e os hititas e resultou em 80 anos de paz na região. Essa paz só acabou com o fim do Império Hitita.
Syria basically went to the Hittites. Palestine and the coast of Lebanon went to the Egyptians. Increasingly, both empires were going to run into trouble. The Hittites ran into economic difficulties and problems of communications, and the Egyptians started to bankrupt their own state. Ramesses built so many temples, so many monuments to his glorious ego, that the crown, bit by bit, went bankrupt.
Everything he did on the grand scale. It's quite amazing. And the biggest tomb in Egypt is that one that's now being opened up in the Valley of the Kings. There's Tomb 7, Ramesses' own tomb, which rivals that of his father. Those two were the biggest tombs in the valley. Right opposite is this Tomb 5, which was thought to be an unfinished tomb. And it goes down, hall, corridors running off, more corridors running off, enough room to bury 50 princes. It's the biggest tomb in Egypt. They haven't finished digging it yet.
Ramsés obteve grandes vantagens políticas com Kadesh, exagerando seu papel na batalha, com relatos alegando que ele derrotou os hititas sozinho.
Almost certainly Ramses' actions in the Battle of Kadesh are exaggerated. That is not to say, however, that they are not grounded firmly on a kernel of truth. From all available sources, it seems as though Ramses' actions in the heat of battle were decisive, and to that extent his reputation as a brave and fierce leader is well deserved, I think.
There is no doubt at all that Ramses II was one of the great Egyptian pharaohs. I would not describe him as the greatest military leader the Egyptians produced, but when one looks overall at his reign, it is a spectacularly successful reign. His military operations were in the main extremely successful, and if you look at foreign policy overall, Egypt is one of the two top powers, the superpowers, if you like, of the Near East.
Kadesh forneceu material para o primeiro relato abrangente de uma batalha e o primeiro tratado internacional registrado pela história. Kadesh foi o cenário de um confronto de titãs da antiguidade, exibindo a tecnologia e as táticas que evoluíram nos 3.000 anos anteriores. Foi uma história clássica de velocidade, surpresa, artimanhas e confusão, demonstrando que, embora as armas de guerra tenham mudado nos últimos 3.000 anos, a maioria das regras que as governam não mudou.